What do you do when you've given someone a golden ticket, a free, easy way out of a life they claim they hate? And what happens when they throw that ticket back in your face and try to burn the whole place down on their way out? This is a story about a soldier who couldn't stop making bad choices, a commanding officer who was trying to do the right thing, and the surprising way the military can serve up a dose of harsh, unbending justice. This is the story of how I took down the dumbest soldier in my command. If you've ever had a coworker who drove you crazy, or a boss who seemed to go out of their way to make your life difficult, then you'll understand this story. If you've ever dreamed of serving up a slice of sweet, satisfying revenge, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for a story of pure justice. Most of the soldiers in my command were great people, happy to do their jobs and take home a paycheck. They were hard workers, creative, and adaptable to the unusual army conditions we often found ourselves in. But there was one who was trouble from the start. My first awareness of this soldier came just a few days after I had taken over command of the unit. We were prepping for a month-long training exercise in Thailand, and my platoon sergeant Maggie told me that a soldier I'll call Private Wiggles might not be able to go because she had just had an outpatient medical procedure. Our departure was about a week away, and I had to validate the personnel roster to make sure we had logistical support for everyone we were bringing, transportation, food, lodging, and so on. So I talked directly with Wiggles and asked if she was okay to travel and participate in the exercise. Wiggles said it was no problem, that she could handle it. We got to Thailand and set up camp on a Thai army base. 2 days into the exercise, the medical section sent a runner to find me. Wiggles was at our medical clinic, a series of tents with cots and surprisingly extensive medical supplies, laid out with extreme abdominal pain. I went over to the clinic tent, and the physician assistant on duty told me a couple of things. Wiggles had recently had an abortion, and his examination showed that she had the single worst case of pelvic inflammatory disease he had ever seen. Seriously, this Army PA had seen all sorts of crazy things, but he was emphatically impressed by how bad this was. He also informed me that she had developed PID from failing to get treatment for sexually transmitted infections for a very, very long time. He gave her high-dose antibiotics, which he had on hand. We were able to handle the situation, and the PA released her to Sergeant Deb, her section sergeant, who was to make sure Wiggles took her antibiotics and keep an eye on her. A day later, Sergeant Deb found me and my first sergeant, Bob. She told me 2 more things about Wiggles. She was refusing to take her antibiotics, and she wanted to get out of the army. I went to talk to Wiggles again. Me, so you want out of the army? You know you have a couple of years left on your contract, right? Wiggles, I know, but I'm just done being a soldier and I want to be out of the army. Me, okay, I can make that happen. You don't want to be here, then I don't want you here either. But here's the deal, I can get you out with an honorable discharge, and I'll start the paperwork as soon as we're back in Hawaii. But you need to take your antibiotics, do your job, and be where you're supposed to be. You do your part, and I'll do my part for you. Sound good? Wiggles, I can do that. She couldn't do that. For the rest of the Thailand exercise, Sergeant Deb had to take control of Wiggles' meds and force her to take them, when she could actually find Wiggles, who consistently found someplace else to be. At one point, she even accused my first sergeant, Bob, of having sex with her, which was easily disproven as he didn't have any STIs and Wiggles, well, had all of them. We got back to Hawaii, and I started the process to get her out of the army. I was thinking it would be easier at this point to kick her to the curb than to keep her around and punish her before kicking her out. I was wrong. Even as I started to work on her discharge, she ramped up the stupidity. She got caught drinking while being underage. She and her husband lied to the on-base housing office and provided forged authorization documents to get into rent-free on-base housing that they didn't qualify for. She showed up at the infirmary to get treatment for facial bruising. Her husband had kicked her in the face with his combat boots when she accused him of cheating on her. She refused to show up for work or any unit formation and couldn't be found anywhere for days. She slashed all 4 tires on her husband's car, then attacked him with a knife when he confronted her. One of my male sergeants told me he saw her stripping at a gentleman's club in Honolulu the night before. I got a call from a temp agency asking if it was okay for her to continue working for them. At this point, her actions were egregious enough that I could no longer just kick her out with an honorable discharge. I put her on notice that she was at risk for a court-martial. I thought that threat might keep her in line, but she just couldn't seem to stop herself from getting stupider and stupider. At this point, I was wasting an inordinate amount of time dealing with her issues almost daily. She had genuinely and in good faith been offered an easy path, but I guess she figured she'd try to burn the place down on the way out. I was reminded of what my old platoon sergeant used to say, "You want to get stupid? Go ahead, but I can get stupider." Honorable discharge paperwork was out the window, and I leaned into the special court-martial process instead. My legal counsel told me that Wiggles' activities were likely to get her a couple of weeks of confinement at most, and she would probably get an other than honorable discharge. My military legal counsel dropped a little gem in my ear. He told me that Wiggles had met all 5 conditions required by military law to warrant requesting confinement prior to her trial. He said, "If you can remember these 5 conditions and elaborate on the details at our next pre-trial meeting with the military magistrate, you might be able to get her confined to the Navy Brig at Ford Island until the trial." I'm a guy who likes to pay attention to sound legal advice, so I did just as he said. A couple of days later, we went in for the pre-trial meeting, and I ran down the list for the magistrate. Boom! The magistrate ordered Wiggles to be confined in the brig through the trial. First Sergeant Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie went to pick her up from her on-base housing. She wouldn't open the door, but they knew she was inside because they could clearly hear her and her husband making noise. The Wiggles finished up, she took her time getting showered and dressed, and finally came to the door when it pleased her. Off she went to the brig. The pre-trial processes took up the next 4 weeks. During that time, I had to deal with her military defense attorney, Captain Morgan, but other than that, it was blissfully peaceful. I was required to make weekly welfare visits to see if she was being mistreated. It seemed weird, but as her commander, I was still responsible to make sure the brig staff weren't mistreating my soldier. This was 3 weeks into her stay. She told me she needed to see the dentist about a filling that was giving her trouble. At the end of the visit, my boss, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, who thought I was too invested in the case, asked the guards if they could give her anything stronger than Motrin and instructed them to follow up with the dentist. The guard laughed out loud and said, "Sir, Motrin is the best we can do in the brig." And as for the dentist, for the last 2 weeks, she's been telling anyone who would listen that she wants to try getting her wisdom teeth pulled before she's kicked out. She doesn't have a problem with any fillings. It was hilarious to watch my boss's face go from concern to outright fury. "That bitch lied to me," he yelled. I accepted Captain Morgan's request for time served and OTH in lieu of court-martial. Sometime later that week, I got a call from the brig. Wiggles was pregnant, remember the scene at her house, and they couldn't keep her confined anymore because of it. She had to be released back to her unit until the court-martial was complete. Captain Morgan staked his reputation on her being a good girl until we could send her back home to Carolina. He would come to regret that. We got her back from her 4-week all-inclusive stay in the brig immediately. We had another SHT show. She was smoking in the barracks, she had a bottle of liquor in her room, and she ran off for a day when her platoon sergeant got distracted from supervising her. I brought her into my office to remind her of her agreement to be a good girl until she left the island. "Me, Wiggles, you're in violation of your release agreement from the brig." You've been sneaking out of the barracks, you've been smoking and drinking. Wiggles, and doing all kinds of drugs too, she said with a heavy sarcastic voice. Me, be that as it may, I'm giving you a fair warning that you're at risk of losing the deal I made with Captain Morgan. Additionally, you're pregnant again. I'm not sure if you're planning to keep this one or not, but at the rate you're going, this baby's going to be born dumber than you. Wiggles stood there, gaping like a damn fish, and then she bolted out of my office and ran down to my boss's office to complain about me. My boss called Captain Morgan and reamed him for his client's jackassery. A half hour later, I got a call from Captain Morgan, and he asked me what it would take to prevent me from kicking back our deal. Me, you could get her on a plane tomorrow. To his credit, Captain Morgan got her a flight for Sunday, 3 days early. I printed up official orders appointing my executive officer, Lieutenant Ricky, as a military escort specifically for her. He stayed with her at the gate to make sure she got on and stayed on the plane, then stayed until the plane was in the air. We wanted to make damn sure this one landed someplace else. It's really kind of sad when I look back on it. I had 2 other soldiers who wanted to get out of the army early. One just didn't want to be in the army anymore, and the other had family issues that would be a lot easier to deal with as a civilian. They played by the rules, and I got both of them out with honorable discharges and all the benefits. Wiggles could have had the same treatment. I told her exactly what I could do for her, then had to shift gears and told her exactly what I was going to do to her. She screwed herself out of transition benefits and access to the VA and picked up a lifelong black mark for employment, all because she couldn't play nice for a few weeks. If this story gave you chills, if it made you want to stand up to a bully, then smash that like button and tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And of course, subscribe for more stories of justice.